So Dune Prophecy episode 2 is out, and I actually enjoyed this episode a lot better than the pilot. I'll get into why and more in this video. Just a recap of what episode 1 was about. It basically establishes the world of the Bene Gesserit, that the first Bene Gesserit Mother Superior Rakella trained women to become truth-sayers, and that she also fought in the Butlerian Jihad. They don't call it that, of course, they call it the Machine War, and Rakella was a fighter in the Machine Wars. They have a breeding program which even the Bene Gesserit themselves differ on. This is all from Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson's book, Sisterhood of Dune. It establishes that House Harkonnen were banished based on a lie, according to Valia Harkonnen, and so she's seeking to set that right, and mainly introduces Desmond Hart, which seems to be a character that affects the entire story. But he's a completely original character not written in the books, so your guess is as good as mine as to who this person actually is and what he can do. I have my theories which I'll get into in this video. If you like these kinds of explorations, give this video a thumbs up. It really helps me with the algorithm to get this video out there to more people. It's become increasingly harder for channels like this to stay afloat. And let me know if you're still interested in things like this, because the view count versus the subscriber count, sometimes it doesn't seem to add up, so I need to know whether you guys are interested in this stuff or not. At the end of the day, I want to make content that you guys like and want to engage with. So as I predicted, this show was going to have an opening credits, which I'm very happy about because some shows seem to skip this and go straight into it, but I think Dune deserves an opening credits for its show. And their opening credits is pretty good, and it's worth exploring with you because it shows some interesting things. It starts off with the sign language or hand signals of the Bene Gesserit when they activate their powers or start to use their powers. It shows the pomegranate, which we saw in episode 1 as part of the wedding ceremony. And then it closes and it almost looks like a Lynchian sandworm from the 1984 film. Not sure whether that was intentional or not, but it's still kind of cool to see. And that turns into sand, so it could be intentional. We get to see whale fur, which is something from the Frank Herbert book, a commodity sold and traded. And this is actually linked to House Harkonnen because in the terminology of the Imperium in the Dune book, it says that the return of House Harkonnen to power generally is ascribed to a clever manipulation of the welfare market, and later a consolidation with melange wealth from Arrakis. So the whale fur market is the first step to House Harkonnen gaining more power. We see a bull, which probably was the bull that killed Polis Atreides, and we see that bull in Dune Part 1. We're also going to see it later on in the show. And then we get to see something really interesting, an orange eye. Now for those of you who have read all 6 of Frank Herbert's Dune books, you might recognize this as a sign of the Honored Matries of Dune, another faction, which basically the Bene Gesserit have to deal with as well. But this comes obviously much later, so it's interesting to see this eye now in the opening credits. But I guess what this is trying to show is that the creators of the show are aware of all of the 6 books of Frank Herbert and are drawing from them, just like they did with Tyrion Arafel and the Tyrant Prophecy. Then the eye turns blue like the eyes of the Ibed of the Fremen. But what this orange eye could mean is that if there are later seasons in this show, perhaps they'll skip over time to cover God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapterhouse Dune. So those are the last books in the Frank Herbert series, which is kind of an exciting prospect because I don't really expect them to adapt those into films because they're too out there, but I can definitely see them as TV shows, and if not a TV show that runs for 25 episodes long, at least a limited series of 3 to 6 episodes, due to perhaps how much VFX work will be in those episodes. We also get to see a different language, and this was briefly seen in episode 1 at the start. Even before the episode begins, a title sequence emerges with some strange text, some different language. I think it's the Bene Gesserit language, in a blink and you'll miss it moment, which looked really interesting, and I'm hoping they explore more about what that is and we find out who actually created that language, because I'd be interested to know. Is it David J. Peterson, who also designed some of the language for the Dune movies? Because they also use similar hand signals and sign language. But let's get into episode 2 of Dune Prophecy. So as I was saying before, I preferred episode 2 to episode 1. It starts off with an introduction to a new character, a Suk doctor who was trained in the Bene Gesserit ways, and she arrives on Wallach 9 to assess the body of Kasha who was burned. and she carries this grace and subtle beauty about her. She's called Sister Nazir, and Nazir is an Arabic name, meaning inspector or overseer, and this is exactly what she does in the episode. She inspects the body of Sister Kasha, but it's also worth noting that the name could also come from Nazarite, which is an Israelite who was consecrated to the service of God under vows to abstain from alcohol and let the hair grow, which is exactly what Sikh doctors do, they let their hair grow long. But a Nazarite also avoids defilement by contact with dead bodies, so that's why I do not think that it's particularly based on this Hebrew word Nazir or Nazarite, because Sister Nazir of course inspects the dead body of Sister Kasha thoroughly. It definitely seems more fitting that it's from the Arabic, which is a plus for this show. I'm happy that they're using some form of Arabic in the show, although a little vague and limited. And fun fact, this is Karima McAdams, who is in The Vikings, a connection which she has with Travis Fimmel. And she's of Irish, Greek, Cypriot and Moroccan origin, which is really nice to see in a Dune project. And she was also in the Wheel of Time series as High Lady Suroth. I really enjoyed her scene with Tula, and I hope we see her again in the show in some form. As far as I know, she also isn't written in the books, so this is another original character like Desmond Hart. Something takes me out of the scene, unfortunately. The body is most definitely a dummy prop. The head clearly doesn't look real to me. I don't know if anybody else felt the same. It did kind of take me out of the scene a little bit. We get a scene with Desmond Hart and the Emperor where he confesses he killed Pruitt Richesi. Is it Richesse or Richesi? I'm confused. Richesi. I did some digging and I found the pronunciation of this word. So as far as I know, Richesse only comes up in the appendix of Dune. Some of the Brian Herbert audiobooks say Richese, but in David Lynch's Dune movie, they say Richesse.
Many machines are dukes. New machines, better than those on Richesse.
And Frank Herbert himself was a part of the overseeing of that production, so I'm going to stick with Richesse. I prefer the pronunciation of Richesse. It reminds me of a game of chess. It's almost like they're trying to make the name sound Italian. Richesi, Graziani kind of thing.
Forget about it.
And Desmond Hart basically shows his complete loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium, where he says that what he did for the Emperor and he would do it again. As a knee-jerk reaction to this revelation, the Emperor arrests Desmond Hart, but Empress Natalia sees it as an opportunity to use him against their enemies, showing that she's thinking more of the political ends and means. We learn that Lyla is the great-great-granddaughter of Mother Akela, and that they need to use her to find out more about the prophecy through other memory. But in order for that to happen, Lyla has to undergo the agony, which is to use an awareness drug to access those memories and commune with her ancestors. Then we get the typical HBO Game of Thrones wannabe sex scene, which was just so unnecessary. It could have been done so much more tastefully, because in it there is an interesting plot point where the woman divulges that she doesn't care about her brother Pruitt Richesse. The sex scene is way too long, the nudity way too much on the screen. It just seems forced, because they're talking about all of these politics in this moment, which doesn't seem realistic. And it shows that this series is not for all ages, which is a departure from the movies. You know, there are some scenes of violence, but overall it's a movie that the whole family can watch. That's definitely not the case with this show. I thought the partial nudity in the club scene in episode 1 was going to be as far as it goes, but this is HBO we're talking about, so clearly they want to bring in that shock factor, which was completely unnecessary. They could have matched it to the Kieran Atreides and Princess Inez scene where there was no nudity. You could have done something like that, which was more tasteful. So sorry folks, you can't watch this with your kids, which is a shame because it kind of breaks up the audience a little bit, where some won't be able to get to watch this show, whereas the Dune movies were for everybody essentially. Now I thought this scene had another purpose. I thought the woman was actually a Bene Gesserit trying to secure the bloodline in some way, similar to what we saw in Dune Part 2 with Margot Fenring securing the bloodline with Fade Routher. That might still be true, but I don't think that's the direction they were going in. Or perhaps she has an allegiance to somebody else. And the scene is all to establish that she finds out that the Emperor has a man in custody for the murder of Duke Richesse's son. The Duke learns about this and confronts the Emperor. Then Mother Superior Valia arrives. The Emperor denies that he has anybody in custody, but Valia knows that he's lying and wishes to speak to the suspect, because she also has to inform the Emperor that his truthsayer has died and that both circumstances could be linked. I enjoyed this scene because it showed the Bene Gesserit skills, Valia's ability to learn truth from lies, and also how the Bene Gesserit communicate with each other to achieve desired outcomes. Valia then meets Princess Inez, who learns about Kasha's death and panics, but then we see the Bene Gesserit training in effect to calm herself. That's another nice example of Bene Gesserit skill in play. Then we get a scene between Valia and Desmond Hart in an interrogation where he fully admits that he killed Kasha and HERETICS. But there's still the mystery of how Desmond Hart actually achieved this simultaneously. As for the mystery of Desmond Hart's power, we still don't know how he does these things, or whom he really serves. But he says that Shai-Hulud took his eye, and his eye does have some interesting features. And if you look very closely at Desmond Hart's right eye, it kind of seems Ixian or synthetic. It's not as detailed as his left eye. It has a strange slit which matches the slit across his face, where he may have been damaged in the sandworm attack, and perhaps he was revived or fitted with new technology. So there are many possibilities of different factions being introduced into this show, and that is what is exciting about it. This could just be a visibly clear contact lens, which of course it is, or it could look that way because it physically has been removed and replaced with something technological. We get to see the Cone of Silence technology in this episode, which is really cool, the same we saw in Dune Part 1. We get to learn more of the role of Kieran Atreides, and that he's part of a rebellion, where he maps out the entirety of the palace in what looks like plans for an assassination attempt. But it's unclear why they want to do this, and the show needs to explain it more than just being unhappy between the rich and poor. There also seems to be a deleted scene between Haviko and his son, where he's unhappy with the fact that his son leaked the information about the man in custody. But we do get to hear this scene in the background. We also learn that Michaela is part of this rebellion, but that she has secrets of her own. She's also working with the Bene Gesserit. She's a sister, so it's Sister Michaela now. One of the main issues with this episode is there's a lot of telling, not showing. And I guess this is what happens when you have 6 episodes to fully describe everything that's going on in the Dune universe. It's just not enough time to let things speak for themselves. And this seems like a lot of heads in the writing room and perhaps even producer intervention. These are things that a lot of the other Dune commentators have picked up themselves. And the last 15 minutes of the episode are again its strongest point, similar to episode 1, where Lyla has to take the plunge and face the agony, using the Rossack drug prepared by these special plants, which grows in the school. The actress Chloe does a great job of this. She really does show her acting chops. You know, it's not the easiest scene to act. I mean, you're basically communing with your dead ancestors, and in order to do that, she has to take the drug, then transmute the drug. She needs to change it from a poison, just as Jessica did in Dune Part 2. I really enjoyed this scene. I only have one gripe about it, and my issue is that there was too much of a horror element in this. I loved the horror in it, but that should have been a gradual thing. When she sees her ancestors, it should kind of be a euphoric moment. It should have been more beautiful at first, and then the scene turns ugly. But it begins right off the bat something scary, something horrific, where these ancestors are like scurrying in the shadows like little creatures, like monsters. I just feel that it should have been more of a beautiful thing. I know she's scared, so perhaps that fear is coming from her and being actualized in the vision that she's having. But when she meets the ancestors, I felt it should have been more calm at first, and then a gradual descending into chaos, into madness, things like that. But when the scene does become chaotic, it becomes even more thrilling, and it's a great scene. Some things don't make sense in terms of lore, but I'm overlooking that. I'm not even going to focus on that. Because again, I think this has to do with a Brian Herbert versus Frank Herbert scenario. So there's no point going into that. This is a TV show based on all of their works, so there's going to be differing going on. Lyla technically succeeds in what she had to do, which is to get more information about the prophecy, but she also learns other secrets about the Bene Gesserit which they didn't want to be learned. Specifically how Valia killed her great-great-grandmother. But now Lyla seems to be in a coma. I thought she was dead, and that's what I kind of predicted in the show, that something goes wrong, based on the trailers. But she seems to be in some sort of coma, and I have a feeling that they're going to show the effects of possession in a girl, and what that does to the Bene Gesserit, how it affects them, and the true dangers of taking the Rossack drug and experiencing the agony. So we may get to see more horrific scenes of Lyla possessed by these ancestors, all clamoring to get their say in her mind through her voice. And I think that will be interesting to see as well. And if that scene wasn't enough, there's a confrontation between Valia and Desmond Hart, a alone. And it reveals that Valia doesn't have power over Desmond Hart when she uses the voice, and for the first time, Desmond Hart understands what she really fears. But the question is, how doesn't the voice work on him? What power could he possess that makes him immune to the powers of the Bene Gesserit voice? One explanation is that he's been trained in the Bene Gesserit ways, and we see him holding a piece of Bene Gesserit clothing in episode 1 as he approaches the Emperor's palace. So perhaps he knew a Bene Gesserit once, who he lost because that's the only way he would have a shred of her garment. It was someone very close to him. So he's been trained by someone else who doesn't get affected by the power of the voice. That's one theory. Another theory is that he's a Rola, someone created by the Tleilaxu, another faction in the Dune universe. The prophecy says the key to the reckoning is one born twice, which would mean that Desmond Hart was alive, he died and was reborn, created again as a Rola, and the way this is done is the Tleilaxu only need a few cells to recreate a person. The prophecy goes on to say, once in blood, once in spice. A revenant full of scars. That's clearly Desmond Hart because he has scars. The prophecy continues, a weapon born of war, on a path too short. So perhaps this means that the Tleilaxu Rola lifespan is shorter than it should be at this period of time due to perhaps their technological advancements in creating Rolas. So Desmond Hart isn't going to live too long, but his power still remains a mystery. He displays his full power in front of the Emperor and Empress against the Duke of Riches, and he does this for the Emperor in order to secure the ships for his army. And Desmond Hart is also able to withdraw the power to kill, so he has control of this. Perhaps he's a mixture of Tleilaxu, Ixian, and Bene Gesserit design. Or perhaps he's some kind of product of the Honored Matres. It's hard to say, but what do you think? What did you think of episode 2? Who do you think Desmond Hart really is? How can he use his powers in 2 places at once? And how can he withstand the effects of the voice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you like these videos, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and click the bell so that you can be first to be notified of new videos. Check out some of my other Dune content or some of my popular culture videos here.